Hello, welcome to Scary Thoughts, Horror, Philosophy, Culture. I'm Mark Cate.
And I'm Chad Lott.
This is episode 104. We're going to be talking about Jennifer's Body, the Karyn Kusama film from 2009. You can email us at whattthe, at scarythoughts.org. And do you have anything to plug?
Yeah, we are going to be on an episode of a show called Cinematic Underdogs, which is basically Scary Thoughts, but they do sports movies. And so if you like our vibe, I think you would really like their vibe. Like one of the hosts actually was in the same department I was in at Berkeley. So like I actually really fucking love their show. I think it's great. It was a treat to be on it. And we were on for The Running Man because in addition to sports movies, they sort of do like apocalyptic game show movies, which there's enough of them.
They could run that arc for a long time.
Yeah, there's a lot. So I thought it was a really fun conversation, and we'll post about it on Instagram when it finally comes out.
Yeah, it was super fun to do.
And also, I've been collecting death metal logo T-shirts lately from different people. We got the awesome one from Liverpool Horror Club. But our buddy who's on Instagram is Plastic Cheapies, Joe Frazzato. He sent us these great shirts. They say illegible, but like it's just the metal logo.
Black metal font.
It's pretty great.
That's so good.
And he does really great film reviews on his Instagram. But I mean, the way he does it is fucking awesome. Like I'm actually quite jealous of like the thing, how it's such a short amount of space, really does pretty great reviews of these movies. And he watches some really fun. I watched quite a few things. But I was like, holy fuck, I've never even heard of this. Like, I don't know where he's getting all this shit from, but they're really good picks.
Yep.
Yeah, we should probably have him on one day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else to plug before we dig in?
You have that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Of course.
Big news.
I almost forgot. My band, My Heart and Inverted Flame, recently did a collaboration with I hate to use this term because it's very reductive, but trap metal darling Banshee. And you weren't familiar with Banshee before.
I realized I was familiar with Banshee, and the sound of her music is painful to my ears.
Yeah, it's not your thing.
But your song with her is fucking great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. She is, it's this interesting like pastiche of trap and contemporary pop and kind of black metal, very glossy, like Europe, I would say.
Hot Topic black metal.
Well, I was going to say European festival black metal, but she puts it all together in this really interesting way, and she has a really great sort of like black metal, false folds, scream vocal style.
Yeah, I'm not saying she's not good. Like I think what she does is really interesting, but when I hear it,
her music's very specific.
It's like, I just don't like white people doing rap, man. Fuck that. You know, at any level of subgenre, I'm not into it.
Yeah. So we reached out to her and she did some vocals for a song for us. So you can find it on Spotify, Bandcamp, wherever. It's called The Blood of the Heartless, parentheses, Detritus, featuring Banshee. It's actually under our name, My Heart and Inverted Flame. It's if you're hunting and the metadata is not getting you there, it's because it's under our band name, not hers. Just a single. It's got like more plays than anything I think I've ever done in my life. And it just came out. It got reviewed on Revolver and shit. Like
she's like a pretty large artist. Like pretty well known. Did you find yourself getting a sudden influx of young fans?
I can't tell. That we don't have an Instagram account, basically. I think there's one post on it ever.
Yeah.
So my personal Instagram account got nothing of the sort. So I guess there's no way to track, it's not like we have a TikTok page where, a TikTok account where we'd be able to track new young people.
Did downloads of your other songs go up?
A little.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of got a little extra surge. Anyway, I'm super proud of it. Check it out. myheartandinvertedflame.com or on Bandcamp or Spotify, Pandora, etc., etc., etc. Enjoy. Anything else before we get started?
No, man. Like, this is I think this is a little bit of a palate cleanser episode for us. Didn't want to do anything too heavy lifting in between.
Yeah.
So we'll have to come up with something pretty juicy next go around.
I think you were like, Yeah, Machine Gun Kelly. Let's just cover this. People are talking about her, so
Yeah,
let's. It's in the air. Let's
yeah,
do
it's
it.
in the air. Like there's some kind of interesting gender goblin conversations emerging about this film, and this era is sort of being mined for nostalgic ore at the
Yeah.
moment, and that's kind of interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, and so we're going to talk about those things, and
Yeah.
feminism and fake queer representation, and what else are we going to talk about?
titties. Actually, we actually don't really
God,
talk
how did we
about
miss that?
Yeah, well, they're just not in this film, so
Too respectful.
yes, this is a very respectful film.
Spoilers ahead.
Yep.
So where do we want to start with this one?
Well, I'm going to give myself quite the compliment. F. Scott Fitzgerald has this quote that is, "The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function." So I think that this movie is whack, but also worth talking about and has things about it that I think are great.
Sure.
But I think the things about it that are great, like wine, it's aged into it, but it's not necessarily like you have to consider the culture around the movie to enjoy the movie now, which doesn't necessarily mean that the movie is good.
So it has, in a sense, improved with age, but not because the movie is, when reappraised, we've missed something, but because culture sort of wrapped itself around it in a way that helped it along.
I would say that not like wine, it's not necessarily that it has actually improved with age, but that people who are really into it can tell you that it has improved with age and are creating like a story around
That
it.
is a very cynical view of how wine works.
Yeah, it is a very cynical view. And I don't drink, so maybe that's not
Yeah.
correct.
I'm going to push back on that simile.
But yeah, it's from not, I don't think I ever had anything fancier than like, I don't know, like cold duck or whatever.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, like I think this movie, there's a lot of conversation in the post Me Too environment about this movie. And
Yeah.
it's been sort of like reclaimed as this feminist classic. And I think it was certainly a feminist movie at the time, female director, female writer, a lot of like cool female, actresses in it, or actors, whatever the terms are now. But I don't think it's a great movie. Like I think like it's messy. I was a huge fan of Juno. I thought Juno was a great movie.
Wow.
Yeah, I just love the dialogue that Diablo Cody wrote. I liked her book about being a stripper. I thought it was like, I know you're shaking your head in disgust right now, but I thought it was good. And to me, this movie was such a step down from her writing. Like the whole movie is her like trying to make fetch happen. It's like all this weird, clangy, made up dialogue that like one reviewer, a new review of it said, it was like dialogue and slang that had just not aged well. It was made up at the time. None of this slang existed. It was like totally weird, like a 35-year-old, like, how do you do there, kids? Like I was like, how, I don't know how old Diablo Cody was when she wrote this, but she's been out of high school for a while, I would imagine. What about you?
Well, to what you were just saying, it sort of reminds me of, what's his name? Noah Bernbach? What's scriptwriter? Really, everybody fell all over themselves for how clever his dialogue was, and his movies are completely insufferable and pretentious and overwrought. And I sort of feel that way about Diablo Cody. She has done things I've actually really liked, but I think the thing about Diablo Cody, I'm going to be a little unfair, I'll admit.
I have some unfair opinions about her to walk out too.
I feel like, imagine if one of the Real Housewives of Schmurmer wrote a screenplay about being a rich housewife.
Right.
And then we watch it and we want to talk about it. Well, how do you not talk about the person? We always get into these conversations about the artist versus the art. And in some circumstances, if the artist has really inserted themselves into the art, and or the artist has this public persona about being an artist, it's really hard not to let that deeply influence how we talk about the work. Because it's all a continuum, right? I mean, it's harder to do with music, with film, but just think with rock music. Like, how do you talk about the Rolling Stones without talking about Mick Jagger's personality? How do you talk about a lot of really famous artists and somehow go like, no, we only talk about the music. We don't talk about the spectacle of Lady Gaga. That's irrelevant. We're just going to talk about the music. Like, no, nothing's that simple. And I think the thing about Diablo Cody is she really launched her career on, it seems to me, and if I'm being too unfair, you correct me or our listeners should correct me. I'm a young woman of privilege who's going to try to appear really edgy by doing stripping. And there became this whole thing around her about how, like, she used to be a stripper. Like, do you know how many strippers exist in America? Like, it's not special. It's not edgy.
Yeah, this was kind of pre-Suicide Girls, though, when she kind of, not pre, but around the same time. And I think...
I get that.
Yeah.
But even still, it just all seems so disingenuous to me. You have an uptight anti-sex leftist New Yorker culture that is scandalized by... or maybe impressed upon themselves that they would allow someone who is actually taking their clothes off publicly to enter their realm, and they would deem like worthy of their circle. And then I thought Juno was fucking terrible and overrated. I think it's just so pretentious and overwrought and limp at the same time.
I think it's a very sweet movie. It's like,
Okay.
it's not like an all-time great, but to me, like, Juno was like Neutral Milk Hotel.
Oh, I love Neutral Milk Hotel.
Yeah, but I mean, I like that one album quite a bit, but it's a very, like, to listen to it now, I just don't see young people getting into that music now. It felt like very part of like twee time period. I think, I think Diablo Cody has a little bit more in her stripping story it's less, like, let me reveal myself in this expose, like, as much as the thing that really made it stand out was it was kind of funny. Like, it
Great.
It wasn't a dark stripper tale. Like, I think everybody had read that whole, like, oh, here I am, this, like, martyred sex worker. And this was kind of like, oh, hey, it's kind of fun loving.
Right. Which I appreciate. But the idea, the trajectory of a writer going out into the world and conjuring experiences for themselves to report back is that's what writers do, or so many writers have done, and that's part of the deal. That's like sort of being a reporter and either making it a memoir or fictionalizing it.
Yeah.
I don't like it when it smacks of tourism. And that's the thing that rubs me the wrong way about her.
So, okay. So it's interesting.
Like, I'm an edgy tourist.
Well, it's interesting you say, I would say tourist, but for like a different locale. So I think her beat is I'm a quirky high school person. Like, that's kind of like her, both Juno and this movie are involved like wisecracking kids that sort of exist in this strange high school hierarchy where it's like, in Juno, there's the funny line about, like, jocks like that guy always like freaky girls. And it sort of established this idea that the traditional, like, jock nerd, John Hughes sort of stereotypes work in a different way in this time. So it's like the kid that gets Juno pregnant is an athlete, but he's a nerd. Like, and in this movie, the hot girl and the not as hot girl are friends, and it's kind of unclear like what their place in the high school hierarchy is, because all the other high school characters in this movie are very dull and kind of lame.
That's true.
But to me, where Diablo Cody is sort of a tourist, and it seems like she shouldn't be, is in the genre of horror. Like, you would think that there would be like a Jordan Peele-ness to her, but if you notice, there's only one like broad, like one like Jordan Peele callback, which is in the like the makeout scene. There's the, oh, are you wearing my Evil Dead shirt? There's no other references to horror in this whole thing. And you would think somebody that would be sort of like postmodernly referential, like post David Foster Wallace writing. There would be that all over the place, like there is in Get Out or Us or something like that. And then there's this interview that she gave where she was like, "Oh, I wanted to like really riff on Lost Boys." Like, this movie doesn't seem like Lost Boys at all to me in any way, right? And so I'm like, okay, that was like kind of weird. Like, Us riffs on Lost Boys explicitly, maybe even in the same universe.
Right.
And then she says, and she wanted to honor that. And at the same time, she'd never really seen this particular subgenre done with girls. Like, what the fuck? Like, I mean,
That's
first
weird.
of all, like, Ginger Snaps came out like 9 years before this movie and did everything that this movie does better.
I totally agree. I'm glad you brought that up.
And like, there's this whole idea that she wanted to like explore the tension between like female friends that have like, borderline obsessive, borderline sexual attractions to each other, which is totally interesting. And then a lot of commentary about this film right now is like, oh, America wasn't really ready for that at the time. Bullshit. Total horseshit. Like, first of all, there was like 70 years ago Annis Nin. Like we've been around this material before. And, just referencing Ginger Snaps.
Like, and The Craft.
The Craft is a perfect example. And so the movie seemed like the people involved with it felt like they were breaking new ground in some way. And then the conversation about it is that this movie broke new ground and wasn't appreciated at the time. I think it just wasn't appreciated at the time because it's kind of an uninteresting movie. And it has like CGI, like the mouth opening CGI, which even at the time, like, the mouth gets really big.
Yep.
Like, even at the time, it was corny.
Oh, totally. Yeah, that's been tired for a long time, and it's still being used.
Yeah.
I would actually say that seeing a horror movie that's a bit smarty pants, that isn't all references piled on references, I found actually a little refreshing.
I could see that, but also like, and it made me think, was like, am I lame because I like that better? Like, am I the thing that I'm always complaining about?
We are all the thing that we're complaining about.
But, like, I think maybe like one of the big problems of this film is none of the victims are that interesting or deserving of their fate. And that's like kind of like the film never really decides, like, is Jennifer a bad person? Like, she's kind of the victim. She doesn't set out to be a succubus evil monster, but she ends up as a monster by this band that sacrifices her. And like, none of the people she kills are terrible. Like, there's all this conversation about like, oh, there's this feminist anti-toxic masculinity revenge fantasy thing happening here, but nobody's really that toxic in this film.
Except the band. That's true.
Except the band.
Although it is sort of framed in the exchange, I'm forgetting the exact quote, but Needy says something, "You're killing people." And she goes, "No, I'm not. I'm killing boys," which is kind of cute.
Yeah, but then she kind of like undercuts that later where she's like, "Oh, I go both ways." So it's like, even though that's kind of a throwaway funny line for the audience or whatever, it's still sort of like, what are the rules here? Like, is a succubus able to like only eat boys? She does say something like, "I need your fear," but she could scare the shit out of a woman just as easily, Although, like, in some versions of the succubus, they eat your life force via your semen. So perhaps that's like they're being true to the myth.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know.
One thing I maybe should have said this at the outset is that I'm actually one degree of separation from the director, Karyn Kusama, and have actually met her. There's not some sort of like disclosure I need to make, like I'm in an academic setting, but I have actually met her and she was fucking rad. And so I'm a little hesitant to be too critical of this movie. I am actually more critical of the screenplay than the film itself. It was interesting to read about the circumstances under which this film was made, how it was treated afterwards, etc. And it does seem that things didn't really go anybody's way. That might be 20/20 hindsight because, it's sort of deemed, even though it totally made its money back, it was sort of deemed a flop and all that, and definitely undermined the career of most of the main people involved. Like, Megan Fox was never given a serious role after this. Diablo Cody really didn't get to have a good swing at Hollywood ever again. The director,
She works a lot.
oh, she's been hustling, but it's not like she was asked to direct The Social Network or something the very next day or something like that. It didn't necessarily escalate anybody's career immediately after. The impression I get from reading online is that's not the result of, like, let's say, studio/producer meddling, so much as it's like they were trying to make a smart feminist horror movie, and by virtue of the fact that the PR people sold it exclusively as a pinup excuse for Megan Fox, which undermines the entire premise of the movie in a certain sense. I'll have more to say about this later, but it seems that the like resonating ick factor from the way it was treated after it came out was pretty bad, like legitimately bad for a lot of the people involved.
Yeah, I am one of the people that thinks that Megan Fox never really got like a fair shake.
I think she's a really good actor who kept getting these really dubious roles.
Yeah. I mean, like, on one hand, you're like, okay, you're a hot girl in Tennessee, you know, and you got elevated. You are in these fucking huge ass Michael Bay movies, and we should all be so lucky to be objectified in a multi-million-dollar movie and become super rich,
right?
You know, like, so there's that. And then, you know, they really, like, all the press in the early days was like how much she was like the first 21st century sex symbol. She was the new Angelina Jolie, which is kind of funny because Angelina Jolie was still being Angelina Jolie and was not old enough to be put out to pasture by Hollywood at the time. So it was kind of like,
well,
it's like the slightly young. No, I mean, she worked and was sexy in movies way later, you know? And, you know, I think it seems like Michael Bay is legitimately shitty. And there was a lot of, like, Transformers seems to have really hurt Megan Fox's career. It made her career and hurt her career. Because there was like that. She was considered to be like difficult to work with on the set or whatever. Really? Yeah. Like there was like actually a pretty famous letter that was written and signed by like a bunch of people, the Transformers crew, that were like, you know, she's very difficult to work with. They were really shitty about it. And, you know, because it was kind of like, there was some chatter about how like Michael Bay, she'd be like, hey, can I have some direction in this scene? And he'd be like, just be sexy and shut up. Like kind of like pretty egregious.
Yeah.
And it seems to have really happened. And then it happened during this period of time where all the Harvey Weinstein, Me Too shit, I mean, that stuff goes way back. But this particular time period, it was really like the height of it. And she was really not kind of playing the game that you would think that a Hollywood sex symbol would. Like, it seemed like she was kind of like a Christian girl. She'd only ever really slept with two dudes, apparently. Like, she was very like kind of an introvert and like a reader and like a very smart, nice person, and never really like stepped into like the persona that Hollywood had kind of built for her. And it seems like, you know, she was kind of smart enough to be aware that the Transformer movies were stupid. And so she was just kind of there to be like eye candy in this stupid movie. And she kind of did what Johnny Depp did in 21 Jump Street, which was sort of like be sort of dismissive while being involved with it. But with Johnny Depp, he's a bad boy superstar because of it. And with her, she's a, you know, she gets painted with the Hollywood, this is a bitch brush.
Yeah.
And I think this movie was supposed to kind of rescue her from all that. And it just wasn't good enough to do it.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of like, you know, it's trying to like, it's called Jennifer's Body. So you're going to have some expectations. And it's a quite chaste movie. Like it really, like you talk about like the feminist gaze versus the male gaze in film. This movie does not objectify her body, I think, in any way. And I would say
there's a couple of moments.
There's a couple moments like the makeout scene, which is undeniably hot.
The slow-mo walking down the hall at the beginning. I think it was Kusama, the director, was like shot that scene, like her being sexy, low-cut jeans, walking down the high school hallway, and she was like, "As I can show this to producers, and they'll leave me the fuck alone because I'll have done the thing that they want me to do." But
think about like the Phoebe Cates coming out of the Lake Bogwitch scene.
Yeah,
like she comes out of it and it shoots her from the collarbones up and the knees down.
Right,
and you're like, I mean. Like, I get it, right? Like, another movie, like Kathy Yan, the director of Birds of Prey, the Harley Quinn movie, she had this very intentional way of shooting all the women in that film. But she managed to make them glamorous, partially due to their costuming was so amazing, and they were superheroes, so they're kind of fun, or supervillains, depending on your point of view. Like, I don't think this filmmaker did this movie any favors with that decision. Like, I think if, like, I mean, of course it's like googly-eyed teenage male fantasy, but you remember trash in Return of the Living Dead. Forever, you know? And so if we're talking about making iconic visual moments, I mean, what are we doing here? Like, are we making iconic visual moments, or kind of are we just making like dull as dishwater feminist statements? Like, and what's better, what serves the people involved better?
Well, I think that is the problematic of making a film like this, which is, another Scary Thoughts touchstone. I'm going to bring up the idea that you can't make an anti-war movie because by virtue of the fact that you're depicting war, even in a negative way, you're making it exciting. There's just no way around that. And I think that to make a feminist statement that includes really sexy, seductive shots of women's bodies makes it a really problematic gesture. And as a filmmaker, you would have a choice. Have you ever seen the movie Revenge? Mm-hmm. So like Revenge is just like long exploitive shots of that woman's ass.
Yeah.
Like I feel like half the movie is like the camera zeroed in on the protagonist's ass. And it's a female filmmaker. And it's not making a feminist statement. It's just a really confounding rape revenge movie that is very troubling to sort of navigate. Well, what is it trying to say? Who the fuck knows? I don't think that there is a clear statement being made by Jennifer's body, but I think it definitely is playing with the line between making a certain kind of statement about young women's sexuality, predatory masculinity, and some form of like sisterhood is powerful in there. And it sort of doesn't commit to using Megan Fox's body as an object, nor does it completely avoid it and direct its gaze elsewhere. So it's inhabiting this middle ground, and there's no easy answer here. There's no way there's no easy way to deal with this sort of question. Is if you want to make a feminist statement about the male gaze in cinema and have a really hot woman and like a star, a person who people know and think of as like a sex object in that film, how do you come away with it without not being guilty of the exact thing that you're sort of like trying to explore and critique?
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying that this movie is doing that, but it seems like it really is.
I think it is. I mean, because like to the plot of the, like important to the plot of the movie is that Jennifer is hot.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like the thing.
Fully.
You know, it's part of what the relationship is between Jennifer and Needy.
Using it.
She's using it. She's aware of it. And I think like the film could have been better if she had been using it even sort of ironically, or even if like the film had made the male victims like objectified or sort of more interesting. For example, the one thing that Lady Ghostbusters does well is the objectification of
Totally.
Hemsworth is hilarious.
It is.
You know, and it works, and it like it says a lot. It like acknowledges that this genre has that trope in it. So if she was like killing these, you know, hot, really toxically masculine dudes, I feel like it would have been a little bit more satisfying, because it's like I've been reading a lot about like script design and like, you know, the history of like books like Save the Cat, which is like literally the formula for building out a script. And it seems like as much as I want to think about total originality and David Lynchian things, if you're close to the formula, you need to stick to the formula. Like if you're making a chocolate cake, make a fucking chocolate cake. Don't make like a chocolate cake with onion rinds on it. You know, like it's just like, or leave off something from it. I mean, that maybe that's a bad metaphor, but I know you met this filmmaker and liked her, but like, I just think that they could have done something much more interesting with subverting Jennifer's body, literally, like in the film,
Oh, totally. I
like
mean,
Titan, for example. That's a
fully.
weird gaze on a. Is this person hot? I don't know. Maybe I'm confused. That's great.
Totally. And again, I think another layer to this is that most of the people involved in this movie distanced themselves from the promotion of it because the promotion of it was so focused on Megan Fox as a sex object.
Yeah.
But to repeat, it's called Jennifer's Body, starring Megan. Jesus. It's called Jennifer's Body, starring Megan Fox. And it's about how Megan Fox is hot. The movie is about how Megan Fox is hot.
It's about how a hot girl becomes a hot sex demon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like if you were like advertising a heavy metal night and it was just hard rock bands. I don't know. It's like I'm trying to articulate it like in a way that doesn't sound goofy or just like a dude being disappointing.
Film, if I may, though.
Yeah.
I think that another little bit of layer to this is, of course, Diablo Cody's whole mystique about, like, I was a stripper, I'm edgy. It seems that all PR, all writing, every review about this movie talks about Diablo Cody and Megan Fox and not Amanda Seyfried, who is the protagonist of this movie, right?
Right.
And that is a problem. It's weird. I mean, you make work and then it goes out into the world. And it's funny, I just watched this video basically dissecting the band Fountains of Wayne's career and one of the two main songwriters who wrote Stacy's Mom. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's one of those like one-hit wonder issues. Like he has this whole career as a songwriter and has done all this diverse work and he's really smart but he wrote Stacy's Mom, and that's kind of, like what he's got to carry around with him everywhere he goes. And it can be hard to be taken seriously as an artist when you've got something huge under your belt like that. As soon as something gets out into the world, that's who you are. And you can't fight the world on that. And so you put this movie out and it's not the filmmaker's fault. It's not the artist's fault. But it is kind of odd that like, oh, it's this movie that has a protagonist who doesn't seem to be the focus of any of the writing about it.
Yeah, and a lot of the interviews are like Megan Fox and Diablo Cody.
Yeah.
Like, and you're right, like the other actor is not really for it. And she wasn't that big at the time. I think she's pretty famous now.
Yeah, she's had a really solid career since this movie.
Yeah, she's made interesting choices. She's clearly the better actor.
She's very good.
I mean, no shade on anybody else. I think that it was a creative mistake to put all the best lines in the hot girl's mouth.
Interesting.
Yeah, like so I was thinking. I just read Kevin Smith's book where he gives life advice, and it's kind of like it made me think a lot about this movie because I read it while we were talking about doing this episode, and it came out in 2012, and there's all this conversation about like his relationship with Harvey Weinstein, but it's pre-Me Too, so it's really just like. It feels in this current environment very narcissistic. Basically, his beef with Harvey Weinstein was that, you did Miramax. When Miramax got big, it betrayed everything it was supposed to stand for. And then when I went out on my own to do my own Miramaxy thing, you just shit on me. Fuck you. Like, not like, oh, you're steady raping, like with your necrotic dick. But what I thought about was when Kevin Smith wrote Clerks, he talked about how he wanted to give himself all the best lines. And so he was supposed to play Dante. And you feel like Diablo Cody is giving the most, like on paper, charismatic and best character. It's like almost like you're making too good of a character. Like those lines should have been like divided up a little bit, or
it's almost like a Mary Sue of
kind
charisma.
Of, yeah, it'd be like. Trying to think of a good example of like where like a male lead had like I guess it's pretty common for handsome male leads to have all the best lines. I mean, Mad Men comes to mind.
But
it's different. Like
everybody in Mad Men gets a fucking singer.
Wisecracking's a little different though. Yeah. But then again, there's Deadpool where Ryan Reynolds has all the best wisecracky lines.
Although, what's the actress's name who plays his wife? She has some really fucking good lines too.
But that might that's kind of my point though, is like everybody has like all the humor is spread out.
Okay, I see.
Whereas it only exists between the two girls, and it's sort of one-sided. Like
Right.
Jennifer is almost always cool. And then there's, I don't want to be like, oh, there's no moral center to this film, but there kind of isn't. Like, it's like, okay, is being like a succubus demon a good thing or a bad thing? Because at the end of the movie, it's a good thing because she's been bitten by the succubus and has all the advantages, but none of the disadvantages, gets to go out and murder the band and be like a super beast in the wild or whatever. So so what justification did she have to kill Jennifer? She should have been like, hey, girlfriend, let's go eat evil boys. Like, not, I don't know. It just seems goofy. Like, I mean, you have to wonder, like, if this movie was made now, if they would make similar choices or different choices.
Right. So no, it has two of my I say biggest pet peeves. But
Yeah,
that list is infinite. Yeah, I need to be a little more, keep things in perspective. Not only does it start with VO, which is annoying.
Oh, I hate it. Flashback VO.
It starts with VO in the present, and then there's immediately a flashback. At least it didn't have a title 9 months earlier, which is like all movies do that now.
Right.
Like,
this is the Rick and Morty thing we talked about from, Look Who's Purging Now.
Yep. It's got the stereotype of like, it starts in the Hollywood version of what an insane asylum is. Mm-hmm. Like thrillers that start with someone in a padded cell and then we work back to figure out how they got there is just a little too rote. But one really bad script line that's in it is in a voiceover at the beginning of a movie where someone says, it wasn't always like this.
Oh, it's the
to
worst.
Set up going back. It's just this like, it's so predictable. It's so weird how common that line is.
I think it fucks the flow of
things weren't always this bad.
I think it ruins the flow of a film because one, like it's like, okay, that this character survives. Through one way or another, she makes it through the events of the story. And so it undercuts a lot of tension, like in their battle together at the end. She doesn't die or she at the very least becomes undead or something, so there's that. And then she ends up like this tough, mean version of herself. Yep. So it's like you don't get to go on the journey with that character. You're just presented it. And so when you're in a film, when you're first presented as a character like that, that's how you know the character. And then you got to back into this like nerdy sort of character. And then I think some of the things that are interesting is like the choices that are like Juno-y choices where the nerdy girl has the boyfriend. It's non-traditional setups and things like that.
That stuff I appreciate for sure.
I was surprised to see like pre-Parks and Rec Chris Pratt in this film.
Shocker.
Yeah, and it introduces this whole thing about him being a cop, which is funny because there's a whole cop subplot in Parks and Rec.
Oh my God, I didn't think of that.
Now he's playing Navy SEALs and shit. That's kind of his jam. But it introduces him in a way and just never really picks him as a character back up, even though he's mentioned later. So I have to wonder, maybe he was cut out or something. Like you almost wonder, like, was he supposed to be like the Dewey character?
Oh, right.
Of this movie.
Yeah.
Because it's like you set up all this stuff. It just like tonally weird things. Like the burning of the bar feels very fantasy and dreamlike.
Yes.
It feels like it's from a different movie.
It does. Other than Jennifer hovering, not flying, as is pointed out, there's not a lot of like fantasy surrealism. But when the bar starts burning, if it seemed to burn of its own accord, it was just triggered by those guys, not like the hand of Satan is blowtorching the entire place.
Yeah. I also feel like, people who want to say that this is a classic horror movie now, one of the things that a horror movie has to have to be a classic, in my opinion, are interesting kills. And there's not a single interesting kill in this entire movie.
And or introduce something into the lexicon of horror cinema that wasn't there previously.
Right.
And you can stretch that as far as you want, but there's nothing especially new happening here. Yeah. Including kills, but yeah. I think another thing that I thought was really funny, actually, Monique and I might have like laughed out loud when we watched it together.
What did you think of it?
That's good. Yeah, that's cute. When Jennifer is between kills and is starting to be depleted, and she's at school, and I might be getting this slightly wrong, but Needy says something like, "You look like shit," and it's basically Megan Fox without makeup. That's hilarious. That is fucking absurd. And it's also like Amanda Seyfried, who is gorgeous, is wearing sort of like glasses that don't suit her face size or type as a way to sort of like make the librarian in her tossed down hair.
Yeah, it's the
face.
classic hot girl cloaking device.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she keeps her glasses on, so she's the nerd that everybody ignores. But Megan Fox comes to school without makeup, and it's like she's supernaturally being drained of life force. It's just like, come on. They didn't even like make her look fucked up. She just, that's how people look without makeup, world.
Do you think, like, okay, so this would have been a more standard way to do this story, but imagine if, like, Needy had become the succubus and, like, part of the plot was her surpassing Megan Fox's hotness.
Yeah.
Like, that would have been, like, a more standard way to tell the story, and I think it might have actually maybe even worked better, because there's something about, like, Megan Fox's character starting hot, being aware of using hotness for what she wants, pretending to be dumb.
She already has powers before she is sacrificed and becomes a succubus. Yeah.
Like, she could basically do everything she wanted to do other than, like, cut her hand open. You know, like, she had all those powers. Like, she could have, it is weird. There's, like, you know, you want in a movie or like any story, really, a character's arc where they discover something different about themselves or they change in some way. Like, she kind of doesn't really change in a way. Like,
none of the characters change.
Yeah, none of the characters change at all.
That I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, not in any meaningful way. Like, let's talk about the band.
Well, before we do, just actually on what you were just talking about, that would change the dynamic between the two protagonists, well, between Needy and Jennifer, because part of the way it was written and part of the way it was played by Megan Fox. Megan Fox said she played Jennifer as a closeted lesbian, and Jennifer Fox is, Megan Fox is bisexual. And so the kiss, we can think of it as like, oh, it's this whole, you know, just this like titillation at this time when two straight girls kissing was starting to be introduced into pop culture as a thing. But it actually, there is enough in the text that there's some sort of unrequited sexual tension between the two of them. It's mentioned by some other girl at high school while Needy is watching Jennifer at the pep rally. And then there are questions about when Needy and Jennifer finally kiss, whether it's Megan Fox now has some sort of superpower that is overtaking Needy, or if Needy sort of like wanted that all along, or is just swept up in the moment, who knows? And whether or not Jennifer has actually been like sort of overcompensating, like protecting her closetedness by sort of like overplaying her sexuality to straight men. And I think that's all kind of interesting. It doesn't play out as well as it could, but it's there. And it's an interesting layer that is not totally overt. But if the roles were reversed and Needy was the one who was the succubus, it would have made that whole dynamic really complicated in a potentially interesting way.
Yeah, there's a lot of like queer readings of this movie now, and you know, like it's all there. You know, there's the conversation about, you know, how they used to play boyfriend girlfriend when they were young. So there's, you know, emerging sexuality. You know, the Evil Dead T-shirt makeout scene. But I read one article by this woman. She wrote about how a lot of people, like how Megan Fox said, a lot of people felt like this movie was the movie that gave him a reason to come out. And at one level, I was like, oh, really? Like your attraction, like to one of the hottest people ever? I'm like, what was your clue to queerness? I was like, oh, like I guess, you know. I mean, especially now with a more fluid culture broadly, like, you know, maybe that it's hard to remember, but I seem to remember things being pretty back and forth at the time, but then, there's also Megan Fox saying she was bisexual, but as far as I know, not being publicly attached in any meaningful way to any women. Like, I mean, it wasn't like Lindsay Lohan and that DJ that she was seeing. Samantha Ronson, was that her name?
No idea.
Like, or you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
It like her sort of like public sexuality was sort of absent. She ended up marrying Seth Green and having like 3 kids and basically being a stay-at-home mom.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Isn't Seth Green? Yeah, I think so. Close enough. Some Green.
Green.
But yeah, I mean, I guess, but I mean, I feel like Fight Club is a queerer movie than this.
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe. If it's like a stunningly attractive person in the lead that makes you question your feelings or reveals them,
Right. So you were asking a question about the band, about Low Shoulder?
Like, I guess the band and the music in general, like there's a lot of love for the soundtrack out there. And, there's some good songs on it. It has Hole's best song. There's that Sword song, which is like, I think it's over the scene where the football player is just standing by himself in the field, upset because his friend died in the fire. Oh, yeah. What a moment to have like a gay character. He's like all upset. I thought the way I thought that scene was going to go, I'd forgotten when I'd seen it the first time, but the way I thought it was going to go is she was going to try and seduce him and he was going to be like, that was my boyfriend that died in the fire. Like, I thought that would have been kind of an interesting way to do that.
That would have been good.
But that's not what happened. And then that White Lies song that's in the scene, who uses it really well is in the scene where the 2 characters first kiss and a girl walks home alone at night. Like, that song that has like that driving rhythm, that song is the song that plays when they first go into the dance in this movie. So there's like good songs on the soundtrack, but the band, I guess, is supposed to be a joke. But the songs sounded credible enough to where I was like, oh, is this an actually famous song for this shitty genre of music or not?
Right. That's funny. I earlier was talking about watching a video about Fountains of Wayne. It's this YouTube channel that I watch quite religiously called Trash Theory. And the guy from Fountains of Wayne actually he has a lot of music that if a Hollywood movie needed a hit single that the band in the movie played, he would write that song. So That Thing You Do, which is like a fake Beatles fictional movie, he wrote their hit song. Or Josie and the Pussycats, their big hit, he wrote that hit. Yeah. So like when Hollywood needs like a smash hit in world, he actually is the person who writes that smash hit.
It's such a tough one because it's like, this, with one exception I'm going to mention in a second, the song is never that good, so it always creates like a jar to the audience. Well, I think
it's like it's that Tenacious D,
right? The
song
best song
about
ever.
The best song ever.
Yeah.
This isn't the best song ever. This is the song about the best song ever. However the lyrics go.
The one notable exception is Dan Byrne, who's a San Francisco like singer songwriter, did a lot of the songs in Get Him to the Greek, and they're great.
Oh, that's
like,
cool.
They're kind of like the Morrissey-esque, like Bangers and Mash song.
They're like not amazing, but they totally work.
They work for the movie.
They fit. Yeah,
because it's like you could imagine in this world where there's this absurd Morrissey character, kind of like they seem like the songs that character would have actually written.
I need to rewatch Eddie and the Cruisers. I seem to remember that had a similar thing where the music of that band. Oh, you know what? Actually,
that movie is great.
I remember loving it, but I think it's the same actor, Streets of Fire. Mm-hmm. A lot of the in-world music that the bands play makes perfect sense, although the era is very skewy. I love that movie so much.
Or the guitar battle in Crossroads with Steve Vai playing both parts.
Versus Ralph Macchio. Himself as Ralph Macchio.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that. Yeah.
Yeah, Steve Vai, I think, is a really like... I mean, I don't want to say he's underrated because people fucking love him. Yeah. It's like he's so famous, but he is so fucking interesting. He has a YouTube channel where he just talks about his bizarre metaphysical theories, and he's one of these guys that is just great. And you realize, like, do you know how he got his start? Like he was like transcribing Frank Zappa's
Yeah, I
music.
knew he was a Zappa
Yeah.
guy. Yeah.
I mean, it's just like to hear the job interview. He tells a story about the job interview of basically getting the job with Frank Zappa, and Frank Zappa's like, make this 13/7 time. Now make it in minor, and he's just giving him all this totally insane, super difficult like tasks of like writing it, and he can do all of it. And I was like, "Fuck, dude, I'm not that good at fucking anything. I'm not a fifth as good at that. I mean, the best thing I do, like as like copywriting, like it's my most advanced skill. I can't even imagine putting my most advanced skill even on the table of like being able to like on the spot write music in different time signatures for some Frank Zappa's totally fucking insane music.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what's a great in-world song is I Still Believe, the Timmy Capel
Yeah.
song. You know, he played here.
I know. I was out of town. I was in Oregon. I totally missed it. I was so bummed. I posted about it on our Instagram page.
Okay, yeah.
Apparently, like,
I saw footage of it. It looked great, and he was just totally for it.
so he's still jacked, which is kind of interesting. He's a bodybuilder.
We're talking about the muscly, shirtless saxophone guy from
sexy saxophone guy.
Lost Boys, by the way.
Yeah. If you're listening to this show, you should know that.
Yeah, that's true. I shouldn't have explained that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's on you.
Yeah, I've heard it's a great show. I heard he like does all the hits and like he closes with that, and everybody sings along, and he wears the chains and stuff. So, so to me, like, okay, a guy like that who knows how his bread is buttered, and it just does it joyfully, I think is like. I mean, the sexual politics are so complicated about it, but if I was like in Megan Fox's position, I think I wouldn't be so bummed about the patriarchy, you know, if you're coming out on top.
I'm super curious about where she goes. Like, you know, it's not for me to say how people should deal with their careers. And God only knows, you know, the way some people are held back and the way some people are, you know, the gates are wide open. But she could pull a Radcliffe, you know. She could go like, yeah, the world knows me as this thing. They want to put me in the box. I actually have enough money that I don't need to care, and I can still be an artist.
You mean Daniel Radcliffe, most known for Swiss Army Man?
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
That whole thing of like memory holing Harry Potter that's been happening lately is
amazing.
Fucking crazy.
I love it.
It's like they're like 6 out of the 10 top best-selling novels of all time are Harry Potter books.
Yeah.
And you're just like, the person who wrote them, well, we just don't talk about, we're just Voldemort her.
Whatever.
It's so crazy. I mean, to me, like look, have whatever opinion you have about her turf status or whatever. But it's like crazy that somebody so famous for writing something that's so beloved could get memory hold from it. It to me, it's very interesting. Like it means like if it can happen to her, like what do we jabronis have as protection in this world? But yeah, like I mean, but Megan Fox, I keep fucking mixing them up. Yeah, totally. It's so weird. So she, I think, is going to be more known as a celebrity than an actor now. Like this, like the rapper Lil Xan had like a really interesting thing where he's like, you know, I started off as a rapper, but now I'm more of a celebrity. And you're like, well, what's the distinction? And the distinction is like, he didn't need to do his art anymore to like actually keep moving on. But eventually he just fell off from it. But with the whole Machine Gun Kelly romance, she's very much in the public's eye right now. And then she also seems to be kind of a stand-in for, she's into like tarot cards and astrology and all this stuff and mediumship. And there's like a lot of energy around her like personal beliefs, and she's pretty articulate about them. I could see her, sounds crazy, I could see her almost doing like a Call Her Daddy sort of thing and having some sort of a weird metaphysical elevated like Whitney Cummings type of podcast before being an actress again.
Whoa.
Because like think about it, like for Hollywood, she's getting kind of older and she's never really advanced any like Angelina Jolie level acting abilities to my mind. Like maybe she has it in her, but like I've never seen it. Like she's never been bad at anything, but she's never been great in anything either. So
well, like, I would say, and I'm not saying you're not saying this, but to be fair to her, she has never really had any good roles. that would really feature like I almost think like she could be one of the greatest actors walking
You
the
would never
earth.
know.
We wouldn't know because the best movie she ever was able to display her talents in was Jennifer's Body.
Yeah. But you know what? Though? I kind of like call bullshit on that a little bit because it's like, where's the where's your Nicolas Cage vibe where you do one for you, one for them? Like any of these people.
That's kind of what I meant about she could be pulling a Daniel Radcliffe if she wanted
if
to.
she wanted to. And I think that a lot of these people might not want to.
Well, that's the thing. There can be two things. She could feel like I've tried so fucking hard to be taken seriously and nobody wants to. And why should I push that boulder up the hill anymore?
Yeah.
It just makes no sense. Like my life is way better when I do the things that make me happy than when I just keep trying to beat my head against the population of planet Earth having ideas about who I am that they will never change.
Yeah. And then you also, you never know like what film she could have been attached to that were just never made.
Totally.
She could have been like all in on whatever and it just fell apart a bunch of
Totally.
times.
She could have been like in development of some amazing thing and it went on for 2 years and never happened. And then that happened a second time. And then at some point you got to go like, this is a waste of my life.
Yeah.
I could have been reading tarot cards this whole time.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean by the passion too. Like for example, like Jay Leno, right? Like Jay Leno's Garage, everyone loves it. Everyone hated Jay Leno in the Late Show, like or anybody like that was smart or literati or whatever, especially post Bill Hicks's brutal bit about him. But like maybe she would be happier doing like Gwyneth Paltrow, for example, seems to be perfectly happy doing all the goop stuff instead of actually being a movie star, and that makes sense to me. Like I've worked on a few extremely small scale sets, and it's boring and shitty. Like it seems really awful.
Yeah. Well, it's boring and shitty if people are giving you parts that aren't actually challenging you as an artist. Mm-hmm. And then the fallout is really tiresome. Part of doing an art form like writing a book or being in a movie is that you pretty much only get feedback after the fact by writers, and then maybe interviews. And if everybody's a fucking dumbass, it's kind of hard to fight that wave.
Yeah. And especially too, if you're like she seems to be sort of like, interested in reading philosophy and stuff like that. So people like that, I think, tend to get to a certain point where you've made enough. You don't see her out Kardashian style in a Lambo or whatever. She seems to live a pretty modest life, which I find super respectable. So she could have just made her Transformers money, not set it on fire in a dumb way.
Yes.
And, like at that point, if your financial needs are met, you wouldn't do it anymore. Like, if I had suddenly $5 million in the bank, I'm not writing ad copy for insurance companies anymore. I'm fucking done,
I think there's, so people come and go from Hollywood all the time, but I do find that increasingly I've noticed that when I look people up, when I'm watching a movie and look them up on IMDb, whenever it's someone I'm like, whatever happened to that person?
100 TV shows.
Oh, okay. There's that.
Yeah.
When that's not the guy, that is totally, like every variation of Law and Order twice. And, but okay.
Like the director of this film, for example.
Yes.
I was like, what has she done? And I was like, oh, every TV show.
A lot of awesome
TV.
TV. Yeah. But okay, when it's not that, I found when there is like an abrupt halt in their career, often in their 30s, that happens to women all the fucking time and not as much to men. If they're of a, people come and go, but it's like if you're above a certain level of success, the chances that you just one day never make another movie, if you're a woman, is infinitely higher. And I can totally understand that mysteriously in the same industry that collectively decides to protect a Weinstein, the chances of a woman going like, you know what, this is just not worth it. I'm just going to go like raise my kids or raise goats or, do anything.
Yeah, like
subject myself to this.
That's literally what
nonsense.
Adrienne Curry did.
Who's that?
She was like the first really famous America's Top model. She was married to like the Brady Bunch dude. She was kind of like a reality star in the mid 2000s. She had like a boob job and stuff. But now she's kind of like a libertarian commentary gadfly, and she's like selling Mary Kay cosmetics or something like that. And so she pops on like center right libertarian anarcho podcast sometimes, and she's still absolutely gorgeous or whatever. But like her Instagram is just her with goats and her husband living off the land in Wyoming or something. She was like, pretty much, I'm out of fucking Hollywood. Fuck this. It's super toxic.
Yeah.
Really kind of an interesting character. Like her interview on Michael Malice's show is really interesting because she talks about like the toxicity of Hollywood and what it does. And I was actually on the way over here thinking about if I was to go to Hollywood with a project with Megan Fox of now attached to it to get money, like not something I would think was cool. I was like, I don't know what I would do with an unusually attractive sort of past or prime female actor in Hollywood. Like, I mean, what role do you give that person?
Well, just thinking about Angelina Jolie, and I'm not using your word past or prime, but
Well, I mean by Hollywood, like
No, I know, I know,
like
I
the
know.
Jane Austen, her bloom is gone sort of deal. You know?
Ouch. But Jesus, I'm really bad at memory recall of actors' names sometimes. Monster,
Charlize
Theron. Like, I mean, it happened to Keanu Reeves. Like, at some point, going the action movie route is a pretty solid bet.
Yeah, but
You know,
like,
just doing something that is like excitement and eye candy can be a pretty good route to like keeping your career going.
yeah, I was thinking. I'm reading A Certain Hunger right now. Do you know about that book? It's like it's basically like it's about a female cannibal who is also like a food writer, and the main character is sort of like the main character is like almost 50, like and is in this story beautiful, and I could see doing that book with her. Like that's about all I could think is like,
Yeah.
But what's kind of unfair about it is like the idea of being an aging beauty is like part of it. But like fucking Jennifer Connelly is hot as fuck in Top Gun Maverick. I mean, like, so maybe that's emerging a little bit.
Right.
Or like Marissa Tomei and The Wrestler.
So good.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Or, you could do Final Girl support group and pull in Expendables. Just round them, but pardon the term, but just round them all up.
Yeah.
Just let them all.
I was thinking about.
Oh, that would be so. Excuse me. Wait, let's pause on this for a second. That would be awesome.
Yeah. I would almost rather. I mean, you could even really do. Like, I think if it was not done really like agenda laden and really painfully, like in the woke way, you could do a female Expendables, no problem. I think you could have Angelina Jolie, Sigourney Weaver, Charlize Theron. You could have all of them in one movie, Mila Jovovich. And if it was like as fun and pointless as the Expendables, and they kept it at that level and didn't make it like, hey, ladies, we're really smacking the men around in this one. Like if you didn't have that.
If you didn't Ocean's
like,
8.
Yeah, if you didn't Ocean's 8 it. Like if you just let them be badasses in the way that like the female fighter pilot in Top Gun Maverick is. She's just awesome. Like it's not, they're not like highlighting it, spotlighting the politics of it. They're just letting it be cool. I think that would be a totally great movie.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you could have later, like you could have like a Sadie Hawkins thing where it's like dude Expendables and lady Expendables, like
team
clashing, teaming up. It'd be kind of awesome.
Yeah.
Women don't seem to like hold on to the spotlight. Like we still have fucking Tom Cruise. We still have Sylvester Stallone. I mean, there's younger action stars, but it's like these old coots really suck the air out of the room. Like they just never gave up the reins.
That's the glory of being a man in the everlasting era of patriarchy, Chad.
Yeah. Well, c'est la vie. If you were going to cast, well, I guess I kind of asked this, but like, what do you think, what role do you think, if you were going to remake any movie, do you think current Megan Fox would be best in? Or any era of Megan Fox, any remake, what would you put her in?
I would be curious to remake The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover with Megan Fox. I think that movie is so complete. It's sort of like remaking Psycho. There's just, it's such a very specific, it's like covering a Smiths song. There are certain things that like reinvestigating it, it's too much the thing that it is, that reinvestigating it almost makes no sense. But there could be something interesting done by making The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover contemporary and looking at foodie culture anew, looking at restaurant culture anew, how crime works, and the sexual politics of a battered, abused, conventionally hot older woman in a toxic relationship with a criminal and how they can get out from under it. I think that could be a really interesting thing. And I think Megan Fox could probably, I don't know that she has the acting chops of someone like Helen Mirren. Maybe she does. But also that part of that movie was so much about the aesthetics.
Yeah.
And I think that Megan Fox definitely, like, she's obviously very conventionally beautiful, but also she's not just a model. Like, as we've seen in Transformers and Jennifer's Body, she knows how to use her body and her expressiveness and her sexuality for the camera.
Yeah. Now, this is going to sound fucking crazy. I think Megan Fox is beautiful. I don't think she's like sexy. Like there's something like non-erotic about her to me. Yeah. Like even, I mean, look, I think she's obviously gorgeous and like, you know, like her fixing the car in the Transformers movie, like all male gazed out, is undeniably hot. But there's just something like, yeah, I don't know what it is, but I would put her in The Hunger.
Oh.
Yeah, I think she'd make a fucking great vampire.
Yeah.
Even though she's kind of a vampire and Jennifer's Body, like there's, you know, it's not too far away, but I think she would make a very good, like Nagel-esque sort of character.
And world weary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love it.
You know, another thing she could be interesting as is the Harrison Ford character in Blade Runner. Would be kind of a weird, like sort of like detached.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be great.
I mean, I don't know. That would be great. But I mean, we're in the territory of like
totally.
Lady Thor or whatever.
Sure. But also that is another movie that aesthetics are half the narrative. Oh, I want to go back and we were talking about the band Low Shoulder. Something I did appreciate about the arc of the story is that Low Shoulder fucks up the spell or the sacrifice because they sacrificed a girl who was not a virgin, but then they get their fame anyway, even though they made a mistake. But then they actually all get killed by the sort of like blood progeny of the succubus. So their failure did get them in the end. It's like the devil caught up with them. Their mistake did have consequences, but it was delayed. They got their wish, but it got taken away from them in the most brutal way possible.
I think the whole thing's pretty sloppy.
I kind of like that.
But the post-credit scene brings up something that I wanted to talk about, which is the scene where they're all partying and they're wearing like what in retrospect are pretty accurate to the time, like, you know, indie sleaze outfits, now called indie sleaze outfits.
Yeah.
You know, like sort of like the Strokes, but a little bit shinier. And then the hotel room where they're doing coke and party and stuff like that. I think a lot of like, even though like we've been talking about the sexual politics of this film and whether it's a feminist film or how it succeeds or doesn't, I think the enjoyment of this film now is all about nostalgia. There's some podcaster was making this comment that he thinks that like probably the ideal time to be alive, if you could go back to any time, was like the American Pie era, where you have just enough internet to where you can get accurate directions someplace, but your life isn't ruined by it. Like it's more about like fun. And if you think about it, in The Matrix, that time period was considered the height. That's the machines replicated the height of human civilization, which was kind of the early 2000s.
Holy shit.
And like, I think it's interesting. Like there's this the whole vibe shift thing where they're talking about like a return to like early 2000s New York, sort of like a Vice magazine, Cat Marnell vibe. And I think the thing that people really like about it is it's woke enough to where you get to the Chappelle Show and you get to laugh at that stuff, but it's not so woke that it's finger wagging and unenjoyable. It was like this sort of like perfect time. It's also my late 20s, so like that's a time that people always remember kind of fondly. So, but culture seems to be going back to remember it fondly, and it's kind of interesting. It's like you have all these like conservative nerds that are like, we got to roll it way back to like the 50s, and like, whoa, slow your roll, buddy. Like we don't need to go back to Mayberry. Like how about just to like a time where most people seem to be having the most amount of fun with the least amount of consequences. Like, and this movie kind of takes place at the tail end of that period where you could go do a bunch of drugs and have a blood orgy with your band or whatever. I mean, that was more your scene, I guess.
Fully.
But yeah, I mean, when you think about the nostalgia of this film, like it being discovered as a retro piece now.
I think it might be a little invisible to me. I think there are a few things that contribute to me not thinking of it as a nostalgia piece, even though a lot of it clearly is it came out just late in my life enough that the really subtle cues, because this isn't like really stylish. This has as much era styling as like The Breakfast Club, which is to say not actually much. It's not like Liquid Sky or Clueless level of very, very era specific styling. So the like very subtle differences in how jeans were cut or the angle of men's bangs is kind of lost on me, because at that time I didn't have probably didn't have a television. I was only watching movies on it or something like that. The markers of its era are a little lost on me.
Yeah. But you were also kind of part of the scene of this time. Like you were, like your band and everything was kind of like part of I could see your band's, or, maybe not your band, but the band that you were in's music ending up on a soundtrack somehow. That this movie was, if this era was being remade in a Stranger Things-y sort of way. Like,
right.
So to have been kind of a part of the art culture at the time, kind of interesting. Like I was just like a fucking bartender during all that, so I was kind of just extracted from it. But
I mean, even something like Jennifer is like sexy and all the boys are into her, but she doesn't have a specific era style. She does a bit, but it's not overt. It's not like her look was 10 minutes ahead of the curve in an extreme way.
I think you should look at the Instagram page Indie Sleaze, and you may, and then look at her, and you may feel different. Like that, like you were talking about that cut of jeans. That is that low slung boot cut jean. Sure. Is very, especially with like the crop top, like varsity shirt or whatever.
Yeah,
I see how you're like blind to it, because like I was kind of blind to it until I started seeing it referenced and curated through the eyes of Gen Z people, sort of like cosplaying it. Like it's interesting, like.
But it's not an extreme. I think it's just not an extreme look. Again, the markers are there and they might be invisible to me, but also they're not such. She wasn't fashionable in her high school or something like that.
I've been looking at a lot of pictures of this time period, and most people really weren't. Like you like think about like high fashion in the time was the Strokes. Like they were like considered like the knife edge of men's fashion. If you look at them, they look like fucking schlubby IT guys at weddings. Like, like fully untucked shirt, Converse, and a tie. And like a really bad leather jacket, like not a cool leather jacket, like a members only leather jacket. And I was like, man, Jack Black is as stylish in High Fidelity as the Strokes were.
Yes,
it's kind of like
fully.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that definitely is a marker is that I think also doesn't make this movie a particularly noteworthy nostalgia piece to revisit is that the band. The band, they're just some band. Their music is quite generic. It's not. It's
Grey's Anatomy soundtrack music.
Whoa. Sure. Like it's not doing something that could only have happened in that moment. You know, they're not. Yeah. Wait, what year did this come out?
2009.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Also, like, this is like right in the middle of. It's kind of funny, like, people say, oh, this movie didn't do very well, but like 2009 was a fucking global financial catastrophe. Like, nothing was doing very well, you know?
Very true.
The fact that this movie made its money back is like kind of a miracle. It's interesting, like, to think about like the aughts as a style moment. And when I'm looking at these like sort of like fantasy versions of the time, it's interesting to see like pantyless Lindsay Lohan shiny dress being merged with the Strokes stuff. So it's like those two things didn't exist in the same places.
That's the thing where me, who was a teenager in the 80s, if you wore an Izod shirt, you were a rich douchebag. But in retro movies, like a polo shirt is just a polo shirt. The new waver wears a polo shirt, but that wasn't the case. The punk kid with the polo shirt never happened at the time, and I'm making a stupid rule. But it's that sort of like invisible thing when people are styling a retro piece where their blind spots are that, you know, like I was observing about Stranger Things having dialogue that was incredibly inaccurate to the era.
Yeah.
Clothes end up doing that too. And my biggest complaint about this sort of thing is soundtracking. You know, watching Paper Girls, because I like the comic. It's on Amazon Prime now. It's okay. It's fun. It's a lot of kids riding around on bicycles in the 80s. It's that freedom thing.
Yeah.
But like suddenly a New Order song comes on. Like none of these kids listen to New Order. Why is this song on? You know, it's that kind of thing.
Are you doing that Kate Bush thing again? Where you're mad?
No.
Okay.
Different concern. I'm less mad. The girl in Stranger Things could well have been listening to Kate Bush. But anyway, doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like, you're like, these kids would have never listened to New Order. And then in Jennifer's Body, I was jazzed to hear the sword. I was like, yeah, fuck yeah. like just the joy of metal versus the dreary sadness of new wave. I don't know that I have anything else to say about this movie.
Speaking of music, I do like the fact that this movie is named after a whole song, but not the whole song that's in the soundtrack.
Yeah, no,
which is fine because the song Jennifer's Body would not have been a horror movie closer. So,
no.
Fine.
Yeah.
Was it Violet? Yeah.
I don't know.
It totally works.
I'm not sure. Yeah, don't watch this movie. No need.
I disagree.
You think?
Yeah. I think it's, well, it depends who you are, right? I mean, if like, it's way better than so many horror movies I've watched in the last year.
It's better than anything that's been on Netflix lately.
I might agree with that.
Yeah.
For example. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how many movies on Netflix I've started and stopped. Like, I'll watch like 5 minutes of it and I'll be like, this is a total waste of my time.
Did you try either of the Babysitter movies?
Oh,
okay.
I tried watching that Ryan Gosling Gray Man movie.
Oh yeah.
I got 1.5 minutes into it and I was just like, fuck this movie. Like,
really?
There's something
I'm
about...
determined to like it.
There's something about Netflix banter, script banter. Like, there's like a level of just like... there's just a tone, like, you know, in the way that like Hammer horror movies have a tone, Netflix movies have a tone.
It's already being codified, but I'm really curious in like 12 years when the tropes of what Netflix was at its peak, which it seems we are just past the tipping point of.
Yeah, I don't see Netflix. I mean, it's hard to say. Like, it's such a thing.
It's
right?
it could persevere, but I think that the thing of Netflix, like the golden age of Hollywood, there's still a Hollywood, but we know what the golden age was. The golden age of Netflix, I'm curious in like over 10 years, all the tropes, all the things that we totally see and we can appreciate now and notice, but like with a little more time, it might really gel into some interesting appraisal of what's been going on.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, a lot of times people know I have a horror movie podcast or I'm into movies at work, right? So people always, did you see this? Did you see this on Netflix? It's always Netflix. It's never Amazon Prime. Like nobody ever says, "Did you see this Amazon Prime
I
show?"
know
for
that
some
every
reason.
one of your coworkers pays for Amazon, though.
Of course, like that's the thing that
that's
doesn't make
interesting.
any sense.
Yeah.
It's like, and The Boys is better than anything that's ever been on Netflix.
Fully true.
Yeah.
Well, wait.
What's better that Netflix?
Black Mirror.
Not all the way through. It is not consistently for 4 seasons good.
Disagree, but okay. But whatever.
Yeah, like
The exception almost proves the rule here.
yeah. I mean, even then, maybe Black Mirror, like
Right.
like, but there's no time I go to Netflix and there's a Netflix original and I don't choose Community over it.
Yes.
Like I'm always like,
Yes.
oh, there's 6 seasons of this great show.
It's amazing.
I don't think I've been trying to think whether or not it's better than Parks and Rec, and I don't think it is because I think Parks and Rec is a little more timeless because of its optimism.
Huh.
And like the references in Community are getting so old now that I think a young person going to watch it now would have trouble.
Oh, like what?
Like Short Circuit 2. Like being like a plot point in a couple episodes, like who the fuck is going to get that?
Nobody at the time either.
I think also it's a meaner show than Parks and Rec is. And I like that. I like that about it.
It's got a little bit of a dark soul.
I also think the number, even though all the gay jokes come through characters who are bad's mouths, there's a lot of them.
Yep.
And I think that like a modern ear might not like, even though the Chang going gay is to me the funniest thing in the entire series because in part of it's because he's so awful. It's like, and the moment is so heartfelt in the show, or it's supposed to be.
No, I mean, he's the one they killed an episode because I don't want to blow this open again.
I know we've talked about it. I actually meant to ask you if you had it like downloaded anywhere, like the episode.
I might. So we're talking about how Chang, the same character, essentially dressed up in blackface, but it wasn't blackface. He was wearing black makeup to be what's it called? A black elf?
Dark elf.
Dark elf, yeah. But it's been pulled from circulation because...
And it's like one of the best. I think it's maybe the best Community episode.
It's incredible.
Yeah, because it's about mental illness and being there for people, especially people that are marginal.
Yes.
And, it's sort of like... I mean, we've talked about this before, but in case you haven't heard it, it sort of comes a little before the current major renaissance of D&D, where D&D is like fucking everywhere now. It's just such a well-crafted area. It's super conceptual. Like they're playing the game and the game is relating to the events of the story and the story is like kind of expanding out. And you as a viewer are forced in a very D&D like way to participate in that bridging of reality and fantasy. It's just so smart. And then the reason they pulled it is there's like sort of blackface, but it's not. That's the thing. Like it gets my fucking autistic brain twisted up. Is it's literally not blackface.
It's technically not blackface, but if you're triggered by blackface, that's just an academic differentiation.
I mean. Yeah, I guess. I'm
not arguing for or against. I'm just saying.
I think you would just be so like logically wrong to like object to the episode. Like it was pulled because some suit was like, "Oh, we can't have this blackface episode."
Yes,
and
but are they going to pull the episodes that have him yelling gay?
They haven't. And there's even episode, like the episode where like Chevy Chase is dressed up as an Indian Swami. That's literally brownface, and that's still in there, and it's actually, I would say I'm not offended, but like it's actually more offensive,
doing the thing.
Than the other stuff.
Oh, Lord.
Have you seen the GQ photo shoot of the 2 leads wearing like dominatrix outfits? The 2 women.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's the hottest photo shoot GQ has ever done. I
saw that before I'd even seen Community.
Man, for Allison Brie in Community just does it for me.
Oh, she's the best.
Yeah.
She's so funny. Oh, she's
so
funny in that D&D
D&D
episode.
So good.
Okay, anyway. I have a random thing to bring up.
Okay.
I brought up Stranger Things a minute ago, but I went to the Stranger Things experience.
Oh, yeah, and you liked it.
I liked it better than the show. I think. I don't know. Maybe I'm just saying that to say it, but like for our listeners who didn't hear me talk about this last episode or don't know about this, in San Francisco, in the Armory, which is this big building where kink.com used to live,
Spackled with semen.
Just wall-to-wall lube and sin. The Stranger Things experience, and it's sort of it's like a haunted attraction essentially. It follows the same sort of beats and structure. Like you pay your money, you walk in, there are actors who play parts and you do things and you go from A to B, and there's a lot of spectacle and a lot of thrills. I was just fucking solid. And it's funny, I was texting with Peaches Christ, who does the Terror Vault that we've talked about several times. And of course, he was like, yeah, that's what you get when you have $1 million budget to make an attraction, right? It's great.
Yeah,
it's very expensive, though.
Yeah, I went to the LA one that was in the car, and it was like definitely like Rocky Horror Shadowcast meets dinner theater vibe.
Yeah. This the actors are great. The video is great. It's so funny. Actually, one thing I will point out is we, in our, I think our second conversation about, our conversation about Stranger Things season 4, part 2, I think we were talking about the young actress who plays 11. And there are basically the majority of the kids in Stranger Things are in the Stranger Things experience. But there's this one long extended scene where 11 is in part of it, and in part of it, she's clearly paid by someone else. So all of the actors from Stranger Things who are in it, which has got to be like 7 or 8 of them, including like Paul Reiser, some of the adults, are all in it. But the one person who has a stunt double, and it's not even a stunt double for stunts, I just mean someone standing in for, is the woman who plays 11. Like it's like she agreed to it, but she only agreed to doing part of it, just enough to be annoying or something. It was hard not to read that as like, oh, someone,
you really have it out for her.
No, I don't. But it's very obvious. It's like every part where Paul Reiser is in it, he's in it. Every part where any of the other characters are in it, they're in it. But her, it's like sometimes it's some other actor and sometimes it's her, and it's hard not to go like, oh, that can't be good. You know, whatever the reason that's happened is not a good story.
She has a better agent, probably.
Or she, was like locked in her trailer doing cocaine instead of doing the whole scene. Who knows?
I hope it's
I guess I do have it. I don't know.
I know you're doing the thing that culture did to Megan Fox to her.
Oh, dude.
So cruel. Like 12 years from now, some podcast will be talking about it. How unfairly she was treated. She's probably being molested by somebody involved in the show right now as we speak.
Dude.
I mean, Hollywood didn't change. They just sacrificed one goat.
Fair.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're finished with Jennifer's Body.
Yeah,
right?
it's done. There's no reason to continue talking about this movie unless you're like pursuing a gender theory degree or something.
Good luck with that degree.
Have fun.
Thanks for listening. I'm going to open the window. I think
it's stuffy in here.
Might introduce a little extra ambient noise, but